Alrighty then, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. How's everybody doing out there? I appreciate everyone that decided to listen. If you like what you hear, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on iTunes and Spotify. Also, spread this word of mouth, and on social media, just go search the Alex Cuesta Show. We're there. We're everywhere. Today is Thursday, the 6th of 2022. For anyone that is an astute listener, first of all, you can hear my voice is all sorts of fucked up still. I'm still recovering from being sick yesterday, so there was no show yesterday. I was hacking up a lung all day, so definitely wasn't going to be able to do a show. Today, I'm going to be carried in this show, and thank God I'm going to be carried because I sound like shit. I know I do. We have my brother here as always for the Alex Cuesta Show. Dave, how are you?
Hello, I'm pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. Listen, ever since we did the small talk episode, David makes sure that he has to do more small talk so he doesn't sound like a dude.
It's still not a lot.
It's still not much. It is still not much. And also with us today is someone that, if you listened back during the Sports Opinions podcast days, he was someone that came on, and he's one of my good buddies. I made the joke back then. I'll still make it now. The man's my quarterback. He always will be. Good buddy from home, Ant Palmiotto. How's it going, Ant?
What's up, guys? I'm so excited to do this. I couldn't believe how long ago that was. It feels like it was 6 months ago, and that was probably more like three and a half years ago at this point.
I've been messing around doing this for the better part of 4 years, which is bizarre. Yeah. It doesn't even feel like I've been doing it for that long. But before we jump into any fun topics, we're going to do what I like to do because, Ant, I don't know if you've listened or not, but I've been holding Joe Biden to account because during the beginning of the coronavirus, what did we see on TV everywhere, every network? The coronavirus tracker. It was all being linked to Donald Trump. So because I'm fair, I'm linking everything since Biden took over. All the cases, all the debts are going on his ledger. So I'm just going to give that to everybody, give everyone the numbers because no one's saying about the numbers anymore. And even though they're getting better, my whole thing is until the federal government drops this down from pandemic and is willing to give up emergency powers, I'm going to hold them to task. So today's the 6th, obviously, and we are sitting at 80,208,810 cases. That's a 53,413 case uptick from 2 days ago. So there was a surge somewhere because we've been sitting there around 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. But deaths, they're an anomaly. We're at 982,576. That's only 11 more deaths from 2 days ago. So my question, we'll start off with this, guys. What the fuck are we doing? Why is it not officially an endemic yet? We only have 11 deaths. The cases are what they are. And do you have any opinion as to why they haven't dropped this down from pandemic to from the pandemic emergency level to just an endemic?
Well, it's the same thing that happens all the time. Once you give the government some kind of power, whether they should legally have that authority or not, they don't give it back. So we're going to have to claw it out of their cold, dead hands, which bringing awareness to what's actually going on here is how you do that. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've been pretty vocal against lockdowns, against mask mandates for a long time. And it's starting to the tides have definitely shifted, in my opinion. It seems more like moderates and, just average Americans are starting to see that like this just disappeared. Did it really disappear? No, they just stopped talking about it because now we're on to the next topic, which is this whole Russia thing. So, I don't know. I mean, what is it going to take for them to get rid of this pandemic status and give back whatever emergency powers they have? They should never have had them in the first place, in my opinion. And that's certainly debatable. But at this point, it's hard to make an argument that there's much use for any type of mandates or lockdowns or anything like that.
Listen to this. Palm's about to get canceled for taking the Joe Rogan approach of freedom first and stop giving the government a shit ton of power. Dave, we've heard your opinion on this, but what do you is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Because all we hear all the time from Lord Fauci of DCC and from Dead Biden is we need to keep this because maybe the next variant, we need to move quick.
Let's be honest.
And moving quick, they want to be authoritarians. Biden likes China. We know this, but they need to be able to move quickly. What do you think, Dave?
the thing is, let's be honest here. It 100% it is going away. Only in really blue states do you see this still happening. That's because the people let it happen. Red states, people don't really let it happen as much. They still did at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So that was a problem in and of itself. But I mean, you don't really hear from Fauci unless it's from a YouTube channel that has like 300 views. So he's basically gone. Biden's already has cold, dead hands. So, but the federal government does have way too much power. That's obvious. The fact that they still have this going in pandemic powers is absolutely atrocious. But really, it's only heavily blue states where the populace has either been so driven into fear from this or just don't care and listen anyway. Just allow it to happen. And other states, other red states who have governors who I won't even say care about the people, but at least don't feel like getting voted out, will relinquish these powers a lot sooner and have.
So we were going to talk some sports here, but I'm saying fuck that. We're going to move on because we already started going into some of the political stuff. And I think people got to see a little bit of Aunt Palmiotto's kind of opinions on politics here. So I'm going to jump in with you, Ant. You are one of the rare libertarians that I know, and you've been this way for a long time now. I remember even in high school when, everyone in high school, all the kids in high school are all flaming leftists because, it's cool to love the world. There was a very few of us that were like, no, fuck that. That's stupid. Don't just be on the left just because. But you were never fully, I want to say, conservative. You were always kind of skeptical of both sides. When did you start getting on the libertarian bandwagon? Like, when did that kind of shift and say, hey, both parties kind of suck. Let me look for an outlet. This was the one that I want.
Yeah, it's a good question because, and it's something I'm particularly proud of being a libertarian, just for the fact that, nobody typically grows up in a libertarian household. Usually that's like a political ideology or just a worldview that you have to arrive at by doing your own homework, right? And trying to figure out how you think about the world. Because, I remember when, I guess it was the 2008 election, as you alluded to, I knew from just having grown up and just the little I did know about the world, I wasn't on the left. I didn't really agree with all that. So I just assumed, like, as I'm graduating high school, going to college, like, I guess I'm supposed to be like a Bill O'Reilly Republican or something. So
go Maris, baby. Go Maris. Go Bill O'Reilly.
So I'm watching this guy and I'm just like, this guy is a buffoon. I hated this guy too. So I was kind of like politically lost. I'm like, I don't know what to think. So I was kind of just kind of apolitical at that point. And I met a friend of mine in college. His name's York. He probably will listen to this, actually. And he's talking to me about free markets, the Federal Reserve, Ron Paul, just all those ideas. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And it was just like one day in 2008, I went down the YouTube rabbit hole. I watched about 15 straight hours of Ron Paul. And I was like,
it's always Ron Paul.
It is always Ron Paul. He's the Bernie of libertarianism. I will say that. Where Bernie Sanders kind of brought this new social democrat movement in with the Justice Democrats. But Ron Paul, since the 60s at this point, has been bringing new libertarians on forever. Go ahead, Palm. Sorry.
No, and that's exactly it. And then from there, you venture out and I find like my guys now that I follow in the liberty movement, all that kind of stuff. But, back then it was it was just really interesting because I didn't really know any other libertarians aside from my friend York. But what happened was I just realized that all the shit that was, and by the way, we could curse, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is no holds.
If we couldn't, I'd be in trouble.
That was the only thing I was nervous about. I'm like, can I keep my my language clean? But
nah, you don't have to.
But it was like all these thoughts that were floating around in my head that I couldn't quite put on paper. He was talking about those ideas, like the idea that like the government doesn't need to, we don't need a nanny state. The government doesn't need to be interfering in all aspects of your life, personal liberty, personal responsibility, low taxes. And then on like the social issues, like it's not about that you think drugs should be legal it's just that you realize at some point that the government is just people, right? It's not some sacred entity, and certain people don't have the right to tell other people what they can do or can't do, so long as they're not hurting or interfering with somebody else's rights. And that just like made sense to me, and that's kind of how I went from there. And it's funny because like just since then, 14 years later, I've just gotten more and more I don't even want to say red pilled, but I'm like more towards like, I'm like kind of past libertarianism now. And it's like, I don't even see the use for a government. I mean, saying that people need a government is like saying animals can't exist without a farm.
We have Eric July right here. Anarcho-capitalism right here, baby. Anarcho-capitalism. Right. Yes, we are venturing in. And I feel like your story is very similar to kind of everyone that's kind of been on the right in our generation and younger, because it's very rare that you have literally like the Ben Shapiro's or the Charlie Kirks who stay conservative. Because I feel like even me, I moved away from your Rush Limbaugh, your Sean Hannity, your Dan Bongino, Bill O'Reilly conservatism. And I've moved into definitely more kind of a mold where you're taking the libertarian, the little conservatism, and kind of bunching it all together. And I interviewed Larry Sharpe for the media, and you probably know who Larry Sharpe is. And he was brilliant. His ideas were brilliant. And similar to what Ron Paul and similar to Rand Paul, yes, the belief is there, but they, like you said, they understand that people are people. So they're not going to sit there and make a law that they know is going to be pushed back against 100%, because that makes no fucking sense, right? Because you got to sit there and continue to still do the work of the people in the government. So your constituency matters. So it's such a weird, politics is such a weird place to be right now. It really is, because it has to tell a lot of people too that libertarians are very much people first. They are for the people, for the constituency, follow the Constitution, as small a government as possible, get government the fuck out of the people's way. And it has to tell everyone, though, when the libertarians willingly choose to caucus with the Republicans, where the Republicans aren't perfect, conservatives aren't perfect, but they're much more closer to aligning with people who dedicate themselves to just living by the letter of the Constitution, essentially, and getting out of the way as government, than going on the left, who's all about, let's make the government bigger, let's make the government do everything for you. So let's jump into today, because Rand Paul is kind of like the big representative of libertarians right now. How do libertarians get more push? How do they get more representation? Because we're getting more of the Tea Party conservatives jumped in and gave us more like the modern conservative, who is less establishment play ball and more of like the fuck you, we're going to do what conservatives want to do. You get your Jim Jordans, your Mike Lees, your Matt Gaetz, who are afraid to be conservative, and they're not afraid to take the hit for being conservative. Rand Paul's that way. He's not afraid to take the hit for being a libertarian. How do libertarians get more established and get more into the government to try and make the changes that somebody like you would want to see?
You know, it's an interesting question, because the people who are most qualified to serve in our government are the people who have no interest in doing that, and who have no interest in ruling other people's lives. And that's always the rub, right? You know, and even Rand Paul, like I go back and forth on this, because he's obviously not as ideologically consistent as his father was, but also he's trying to do his best in what is the current political machine. Yeah. And I love, you know, when he's taking Fauci to task, or you know, he's going across party lines because he's trying to work on some type of criminal justice reform or things like that. I definitely have to respect that, even if he's not perfect. So to answer your question, though, how do libertarians get more involved? It's really, I mean, the Ron Paul revolution, if you will. I mean, it came about because of the internet. I think that really gives libertarians a platform where, you know, you realize there's other people out there who do agree. And it's not just, you know, we're in such a pattern of just this two-party system. It's got to get broken at some point. I don't know how you do that. I really wish I had a better answer, but that political machine has such a hold on this country. And we even talked, like before the show, I think it was yesterday, where it's like everybody thinks about left versus right. The differences between left and right, aside from a few key issues, is really not that much. They're both big government, massive spending, massive deficits, endless wars. You know, one wants the tax rate at 39, one wants the top rate at 36. It's like, it's what's the difference? So you have the entire political machine of Washington against the people who want liberty and freedom and want to be left alone. So I don't know. I really would be interested to hear what you think about that. But, you know, I guess it's got to start with grassroots. It's got to start at the local level. And it really takes somebody like Ron Paul, who got pretty close, and a guy like Rand Paul, who ran for president. But just at some point, one of these guys has to break through.
So how do you jive with kind of the foreign policy battle, where there are a lot of people that do believe that us being the world superpower, we do have an obligation to kind of help out countries that can't help themselves, in a way around the world. Now I get it. Throughout our history of being a superpower, we have absolutely abused it. We have planted leaders. Look at Ukraine right now. We planted Zelensky there. That is an American plant right there. That is a Western plant. And we can argue the geopolitical aspect of Russia invading Ukraine. Was it justified? Was it not? Me personally, in this situation, I'll just say Ukraine's a sovereign nation. Ukraine was invaded. Russia needs to get pushed the fuck out for that reason only. A sovereign nation deserves to stay sovereign. I don't care about the rest of the part of it, to be quite honest. But I want to hear your opinion, just kind of the foreign policy aspect, because I feel like that's a tough thing for libertarians to sell to a lot of the general populace, where you guys are very much more in an isolationist sense of we shouldn't be sending our money militarily to do anything anywhere else. We should be protecting ourselves, worrying about ourselves, and only genuinely our interests.
Yeah, it's funny because usually if, when a libertarian takes their position and it's not like down party lines, it's like libertarians just look at things through the lens of freedom. And what that usually means is probably on 60 or 70% of things, we probably agree more with Republicans. Other stuff we disagree. We agree more with, the progressive, the liberals, maybe on social issues. But the one thing, it's like in today's world, like the left used to be the anti-war party, and now it's like both are pro-war. Like we were celebrating Donald Trump for not starting any new wars. Like that's something we have to celebrate. The fact that he didn't start a new war. He certainly didn't end any. And I gave Biden credit when we ended our stuff over there in the Middle East, even though he made an absolute, he embarrassed our nation just over and over again. But he did take troops out. So like, it's like, I got to give credit where it's due. But the United States' role as the world police is absolutely ridiculous. As you alluded to, we overthrew a democratically elected government in 2014, which is, how is that serving the people of
Ukraine?
Of Ukraine? It's not. And it's like we wonder why Putin's mad when we overthrew and put in a government that was friendly to the West. Or you look at what's going on in Yemen now, like the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world. Like all these people on the left have these Ukrainian flags in their profile pictures. They don't even know what's going on in Yemen. People dying of starvation, millions of, I don't want to say millions. I think it might be almost 500,000 people now between starvation, cholera, which disproportionately affects like young people and babies, which can really be solved by just fluids. But because there's a blockade around the country, so many people are dying. We're basically helping the Saudis over there, fight the Houthis, which, that's the whole thing. Like you should watch Dave Smith explain the Yemen conflict on YouTube. It's like, but people don't even know about that. And, over time, when we want to involve ourselves in so many of these conflicts, it's like there's always blowback and there's all these repercussions. You can't overthrow governments, for short-term gain and not think that people forget that or that there's not going to be repercussions down the road. And that's what we're seeing now. You don't have to be a Putin supporter or a Putin apologist to understand why the guy's upset, and that's the same story all over the world, whether it's Syria, Libya, Yemen, the Ukraine that we overthrew that government. What do we have to show for the last 20 years of playing world police? Absolutely nothing. Massive deficits, massive government spending. Our people are worse off. The people of all those countries are worse off. It's been an unbelievable, unmitigated disaster all over the place.
Certainly has. Dave, you are, I think, a little more libertarian than I am in a lot of your stances. How do you feel about anything that we've been saying? And do you have any kind of questions or kind of things to put out the palm?
Small L libertarian.
Yes.
I don't like the libertarian.
By the way, me too. Small L libertarian.
Libertarian Party itself can go away. You nominated Joe Jorgensen. Yeah. Good job. But overall, I mean, I'm inclined more with what Palm is saying. It's just like my main issue, especially in the foreign affairs aspect, is listen, you could want to send money over. I don't agree with regime change, but you could want to send money over. But if you're going to send money over, things better be pretty damn good domestically in order for you to send that over in the first place. Like there's no reason for you to send money over that you got from us when things domestically, when gas is $7 in California, when gas is like $4 nationwide on average. So that's the thing, is there's so many things that could be brought up foreign affairs wise, but it doesn't entirely matter if domestically your country's going to hell in a handbasket.
So I have a question for you, Palm. Do you believe taxation is theft? Is that one of your stances? I know David has mentioned it a bunch of times. I believe that taxation is only necessary for protection, quite literally. We should only be taxed for our military. Outside of that, fuck off. Do you think taxation is theft, or you think there's more reasons to tax?
In principle, I think taxation is theft to the extent there are tax, because I'm not an idealist. What's one thing that drives me crazy about libertarians is like, taxation is theft. All taxes are like, I'm more of the opinion that like, as long as we're moving towards my ideal society, which is significantly less government. And like I said, I'm moving towards like, what's the government's real role anyway? But as long as we're moving that way, I'm okay with that. So yes, on its face, I think taxation is theft. I think the income tax, just remember, it's basic economics. You get more of what you subsidize and less of what you tax. So why are you taxing income? That's a terrible way to raise funds. To the extent that anybody needs to levy taxes, it should be done so through user fees. So things like tolls, for example, right? The people who are paying the tolls are the people who are using the roads. I suppose that would be the least invasive or the one that sticks to me that really grinds my gears the least. But on its face, I would say, yeah, taxation is theft.
So have you looked into modern monetary theory at all?
Well, in what respect?
In terms of just the theory itself and how it's getting put into practice as we speak in our government.
Yeah, I mean, I have it's closely associated with libertarians, the Austrian School of Economics, which flies in the face of a lot of modern monetary theory, the Keynesian economics that's going on, and that's because it's not politically popular, right? Like Keynesian economics and like what we're doing in our current system, like deficit spending and big government spending, those things align with those branches of economics and theory. And so that's why they're politically popular, because it's kind of a tough sell for like Rand Paul to run for president and say, I'm going to do less. Like that's a tough sell as opposed to some progressive candidate who says, I'm going to give you free college, free healthcare, because it's like, that's my biggest problem with the left is that they read headlines. Like there's no nuance to anything they do. Like what are the implications of these policies? Nobody like goes one step deeper, right? Like you want to raise the minimum wage. What are the implications of that? You want free college. What are the implications of that? What is the moral implication of that? Why should I be paying taxes and then have to pay my own way through college and then pay for your way through college? So like I'm going off on a tangent a little bit, but
that's fine. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I read a book. It's only one book, but it's not like an aficionado on it. But it was from Stephanie Kepler, who was Bernie Sanders' chief economist. She basically brought modern monetary theory to Washington. So I feel like her book was pretty good. And I talked to David about this, and it's weird because the theory itself kind of jives. It does in part make sense in what they say. But what gets me is they never tell me where the value comes from of anything. And that's my problem with it. They say that we could spend all we want. The United States is a currency issuer. Therefore, because we create the dollar, we can't run out of money. And I'm like, okay, but where's the comparison though? Why is the American dollar worth more than another dollar? Where is it getting its value? And to me, that's where I get all fucked up with the theory. So I don't like the theory in any way, shape, or form. To me personally, I think we screwed up completely. We went off the gold standard, which is where Bitcoin is making a huge run, because Bitcoin is kind of resetting currency back to the gold standard in a way, because there's a certain number of Bitcoin. If it's mined, it could be there. If it's not mined, it doesn't exist. And that's that. Going into currency, you're an economics guy. How are you feeling about the current big push for central bank digital currencies, where we're seeing some countries that are already turning to CBDCs? And my concern with them is, it's another form of control. If us three doing this podcast here, we're more on the right. We're definitely not in the mainstream thinking. We get discovered for whatever reason. We're using CBDCs and the government goes, you know what? I didn't like what you guys had to say. You can get your milk and bread, but fuck off. Your money, because it's digital, you can't get any of these other brands. I'm concerned with some Orwellian shit like that going on. How do you feel about the CBDCs?
Hate it. I hate anything that's not completely decentralized, which I don't see how those would or could be. But if you just take a step back, just like to comment on the MMT stuff, people have this idea that like those green dollars in those green paper things in our wallet are like actually mean something. It's just a physical representation of value that was created, right? Like if you just think about, like, if we were on a desert island and somebody just dumped from a helicopter billions of dollars in cash, it's of no value to us. The actual dollars that we have, it doesn't mean anything. It's just that we use dollars because that's a convenient way to represent the value that was created, from all the goods and services that were produced. Like, you have to the way you create wealth is that you have to forego immediate satisfaction, right? Like, you might forego, like, Peter Schiff has a book. It's a coffee table book, How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes. And it uses the desert island example to show that. Where, like, if we all just fished every day and we each caught a fish, we can maybe provide sustenance for ourselves. But Alex, if you go one day and you say, you know what, I'm not going to fish today. I'm actually going to go look for wood and save up. I'm going to forego eating today. I'm going to try to build a hut, right? Now, like, because you sacrifice that short-term gain, and in this example, you wanted to build a shelter, but in the real world, it might be like, I'm going to use my savings and, like, start a business or whatever. Now there's more to offer, right? So, more, maybe one day, instead of catching your fish, you wanted to build a bigger net. Now you can catch 2 fish the next day. And now you have fish to trade with other people, with the guy who was building houses. And that's how the economy works. The actual dollars is just a physical representation of that. So the whole MMT thing and the Keynesian economics of just printing money out of thin air, all you're doing is just diluting the current supply of dollars. You're not creating any new value. Like, yeah, short term, you can actually use those dollars to pay our debts and stuff. And the reason we've gotten this far off the gold standard is just because the dollar is pegged to oil. That's the only reason it's lasted this far. And it seems like that's really coming to an end very soon. So I totally disagree with, like, the Keynesian economics, MMT, all that stuff. I believe in sound money and free market capitalism really is what grows the economy, not massive spending.
So, Dave, I want to jump on something Paul mentioned a little bit ago when he was saying that his issue with the leftists is that they're all headline readers. They put the Ukrainian flag in there now, when before it was mask up, when before it was get your shot, get your booster. They all kind of sheeple go with that type of stuff. And there is a good group of that on the right. There is your Fox News, OAN, Newsmax crazies that just do whatever the fuck they say from there. But I feel like because talk radio is an intrinsically right-leaning thing, that the branch into podcasting and the branch into YouTube has added so much more value, because I feel like the depth of deep thinkers on the right has grown exponentially. And the coalition is pretty crazy, because you have guys like Ant will listen to in the libertarians, or even your anarchists and Michael Malice, or people like I like to listen to, like Glenn Beck, who's a little more of a paleo and also libertarian kind of blend. And you're listening to your, Geeks and Gamers, who talk about pop culture, but they're also on the right. And they're a blend of anarcho-capitalists, conservatives, libertarians. So I feel like even though there's still our share of idiots on the right, the depth of thinking has gotten so much better, because we've already been bred in the talk radio type of longer form thinking, where now we can branch out and we can go, and we're more invested in listening more to getting more of these opinions. You've been on that roller coaster, Dave, over the last few years, just discovering new people and jumping in and out, listening to this and that. Do you think I have a point there? Because the left kind of sucks at it. They still can't do talk radio. They're really bad at it. You do have somewhat of a point there, but I think the bigger thing here is, just like Palm said, where they're headline readers, they're headline chasers, especially when you talk about more of the normie kind of leftists that don't really know exactly what they're reporting, but their empathy is being used against them. They just follow these things, and they've been kind of bred to believe that everything on the right, and I mean everything on the right, is just hateful. But that's why you see so many stories like with Walk Away, with I think his name Brendan Strauss, whatever like that. Yep. You see so many of those stories. It's just like it takes like one thing where either they were kind of canceled by their own group or something like that, or they just watched something and they thought, what about that idea? And they watch a little more and they branch off, like you said, to just so many other things on YouTube or on the podcast space. And they figure out that, hey, it's not a bunch of hateful people. The right does have people that do headline chase, but since the right is not anywhere in control in any kind of aspect, it's not a thing that matters very much.
the thing that matters is the fact that the leftists are very much in control, because it's not even the leftist point. Leftists are very much in control of a lot of media, of a lot of things, to the fact that people will just read what they say in their headlines and then just go along with it. But it takes something simple just to pull them out of it. And that's what you're seeing a lot right now. I wouldn't even say something simple with the schools, but you're seeing something happening with schools that are pulling a good amount of parents out, or even people who just are around kids who understand the innocence of kids, and it pulls them out of that space and they start listening to things that was taboo to them only a few moments ago.
Yeah, and I think Dave Rubin's a big example of that too on The Blaze. He was very much a gay activist and a leftist, and then one day he noticed something. Huh?
Yeah.
He was on Young Turks.
No, Young Turks. Yeah,
he was a Young Turk, and I think, and I read his book. I read Don't Burn This Book, and I do want to read Don't Burn This Country because he's a really interesting dude, Dave Rubin. And he said at one point he was looking around, going, "What the fuck am I doing here? Like, these people are insane. I don't agree with anything that they have to say. They're the most hateful people. And they're the biggest threat to me and my own lifestyle." And I found another thing funny, including Dave Rubin. Him and his husband are expecting kids. They're having 2 kids. They had surrogate kids. And people on The Blaze and other conservatives were getting hate for congratulating him and his husband for expecting kids. And I watched a little bit of Chad Prather. And if anyone knows Chad Prather, he's as conservative, as religious, as much of a cowboy as it gets. And he was on his show, and I only saw a small segment of him talking about it. And he's just like, I don't have to condone his lifestyle to like the human, to be happy and to be friends. I don't condone what all my friends do. But he says, like, Dave Rubin is my friend. Dave Rubin is a person. Yes, he is a gay man. Yes, I don't agree with his lifestyle, but he is a person, and I'm happy for Dave Rubin, the person, to have kids. Yeah. It's so crazy that the left is programmed now that if you're not agreeing with every fucking thing they say, it's evil. And they have this picture of anybody on the right, which the right has now become such a giant spectrum.
Right's become everyone.
Well, it's everyone, because Bill Maher, Russell Brand, and Joe Rogan are on the fucking right. Those 3 guys are on the left. On the right. James Lindsay and Tim Pool are on the left. But because Bill Clinton right now would be a staunch conservative, Donald Trump is on the left. That's what people don't get. Donald Trump is a Bill Clinton left-leaning guy, which is why he was friends with the Clintons. But people that are traditionally on the left, that refuse to just continue to go further and further and further left, are now pushed to the right. And even in Anthony's situation here, libertarianism is much closer to the center than it is to the right or left in terms of our current political looking at it. Like, so it's just such a weird thing. What's up, Dave? Go ahead.
I do want to say one thing. One, that whole Dave Rubin thing, I thought was a very interesting conversation, just from both sides. I thought it was very interesting to hear that come about. But we don't have to talk about that right now. I do have a question for Palm, which might completely divert from what you wanted to do, Alex, but fine. I don't really care. So I mentioned the schools now, but even when you guys were in high school, I'm sure there was a lot of just education that didn't really tell us about, certain horrors of communism and stuff like that. Certain horrors of so many different aspects. Like, I know Alex and I have talked about it on this podcast where it feels like we went over World War II like 15 times during the schooling life. Like, you don't need to go over it that much. We understand what happened there. It was very, very bad, but there's other things in history. So how much do you think schooling has really brought about the fact that people honestly need to almost take time and then take risks out of their bubble with friend groups to learn more about things and not even essentially become libertarian, but just not be in an echo chamber at all times? How much do you think schooling has actually provided that to people?
Public school is one of the most horrible things in this country. And let me be super clear. There are probably like 1/3 of all the teachers I've ever had I love dearly. I could think of specific teachers all these years after high school who really challenged me to think. And I don't even remember what the hell they were teaching. Like, you think I remember what Mr. Savitsky's calculus class was teaching me? No. But these teachers were passionate. They loved their students. They taught you to think. They taught you to think critically, challenge your ideas. I love the teachers. I hate the school system. Michael Malice, which, by the way, if let me just tell you a funny aside. He is my favorite person in the world. He is the best Twitter troll that exists.
He's so funny to follow.
I'll tell you a quick story. I was arguing in the comments on Twitter because that's a really good use of my time. I'm arguing in the comments on Twitter under one of a tweet he posted. And I guess he blocked all of us, the whole lot of us. I was so mad that and obviously I was agreeing with him in that case, but he blocked them. I was so upset that I couldn't see him on Twitter. I didn't want to make a new account. I literally wrote him a card in the mail and he unblocked me.
That's amazing. That's
Michael Malice seems like that type of guy where he would look and go, yeah, he took the time. I'll do this.
Fair enough. But I bring him up. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you go.
I was going to say I brought him up because he makes a great point when he says for most ordinary people, public school is the only time in their life where they will very likely see physical violence.
Yeah,
which is a scary thing to think. And then just the whole idea of public school, it teaches you everything the opposite about real life. You know, in public school, it's like you have to. There's like a rigid, like you have to start at this time, you end at this time. You're going to learn not about what you want to learn about. You're going to learn about what the government tells you have to learn about. There's no collaborative work. As a matter of fact, you got to put your folders up so so the kid next to you can't copy your answers. Everything's individually. And real life works completely opposite. Like, and so many people with school, like I just remember seeing this for the last 10 years. People are so excited. Like, school teaches you that like getting the grade or getting that certificate or whatever it is like, yeah, obviously that's an accomplishment, but like the real world is about delivering results. The real world is about collaboration. The real world is like, do it your own way, figure out how to do it. And school teaches you everything the opposite of that, including, lots of subject matter that, like to your point, like how many times are we going to learn about World War II? Like compared to what you learn about the Cold War and the horrors of communism and Mao and Stalin and all this stuff, you don't learn anything about that. So I couldn't be a bigger critic of public school. I think it's an absolute disgrace. And I really am so grateful that we've had, I at least me personally, I was fortunate to have so many wonderful teachers to kind of navigate that. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done. But looking back on it as you got older, you're like, man, it's crazy how messed up the system is.
Yeah, it is weird. And, and David, you mentioned this, and I think this is part of the issue. People didn't understand why Ukrainians were actually so fucking terrified of the Russians coming in because we didn't learn about the Holodomor. We didn't learn about that. If you didn't seek it out in college, you didn't learn about essentially the genocide that the friggin' Soviets put on the Ukrainian people. But no one knows about that. So no one understands that historically the Ukrainians are fucking terrified of the Russians coming in, not because Putin's a big bad guy, but because they were almost wiped out by these people. So it's such a messed up thing. And, with public schools, I think that us as normal people have let it go so far. Yes, the system is a big government system. So anything big government usually is going to fail. And we've seen this. Schools, people don't like to think of schools as a big government program. Schooling is arguably the biggest government program in the country. But people have let it go so bad. And the rabbit hole that I've been down is learning about the critical theories and how guys like Paulo Freire and Antonio Gramsci have input critical theorists to go into schools. Because for the longest time, in the beginning, in the 60s-ish, critical theorists were the ones bombing places and being violent. And everybody rejected their theories. So they're like, okay, we have to regroup. And their next plan was, let's go into schools. And now we see all of it. Now we're seeing all of the critical race theory. We're seeing the queer and gender theory. We're seeing the love is love type of shit where they're trying to groom everybody into accepting pedophilia. So we're seeing all this type of stuff. And I feel like that's where the public schools get so fucked up, where we're seeing the war now being fought by normal parents that just go, no, teach my kids 2 + 2 = 4 and never 5. Teach my kids that how to read and write. And I feel like if we can get schools back into that basic principle, to me, I get it. You see violence and shit there. But at the same time, organized sports, I love playing sports. That was a value to me. Some of the extracurricular shit that you do, it was valuable. Yes, you could do it. Yes, you could pay for it. But at the same time, I feel like there is a war to be had where if we can get schools on a more of our terms in terms of what they teach, then I feel like it could still be valuable.
I feel like the question is, if you want to go about it that way, though, is it even possible right now in the short term? Because I know you have young kids that are going to be going into school soon. Is it possible in the short term to make the corrections that need to be made in these public schools to actually have your kid's future look pretty good?
Yes.
Or do you have to pull them out,
No.
then make the correction,
Nope.
then go back in?
What needs to be done is all the people on the right that use the fucking excuse, well, the left doesn't have jobs so they can do it, need to shut the fuck up, stop watching their show late at night, skip the game, and get involved. That's what needs to happen, is we need to get school board members that are Marxists the fuck out of there. We need to get teachers who don't teach the curriculum that's in front of them when the curriculum is done well to get out of there. Because I think there is something to being said about making sure that your youth is educated at a basic level. Because if you just leave it up to everybody, we've seen this. Kids will go to work. Kids won't learn to read and write because if a parent has a business, they're gonna value their livelihood. And especially if you're in a rural area, they're gonna look at it and go, you're not going to college, get in the field. So there is a value to at least making sure everyone's literate and everyone knows their arithmetic. So I don't know. I do get the push, but maybe this is the leftist in me. I do get the push to say fuck schools, but I also think that if enough people stop being lazy and get involved and keep this and hold the schools to account, then we can make school something that is valuable again. Palm?
So to give you the libertarian perspective or just my personal opinion on this, like I said before, ideally, I wouldn't even have public schools. I'd have private schools or charter schools or some combination of that where taxes will be significantly lower. So net, you could just pay for your kids to go to school, whatever. But like I said before, that's kind of idealistic at this point. So as long as we're moving towards that way, I'm good with that. And how do you do that? If you talk to a leftist today and you said, I want to abolish the Department of Education, like I said before, they're headline readers. They would think that means that like when you snap your fingers, the schools would literally vanish. There'd be a blank field. Mm-hmm. Like the Department of Education has been around since when? Like the 70s? I think it was like Jimmy Carter or something.
Well, that's not that long.
Schools existed before the Department of Education, before this top-down approach, right? Like why do we have bureaucrats in Washington, Dr. Jill Biden, if you want to call her a doctor. Why do we have people like that dictating education all over the country in all 50 states? I would rather let's just go one step closer to my ideal world where there is no Department of Education. Let all 50 states do school 50 different ways. And real quick, we're going to see what is the difference between South Dakota and Mississippi or California and Arkansas. Some states are going to be doing really well, some aren't. And you have 50 different experiments, if you will, on what works and what doesn't. And maybe different things will work for different states, which is even another reason why the government shouldn't be doing things top down. To the extent there's any government at all, including public education, it should be done as local level as possible. And just to piggyback Alex's point, unfortunately, there are a lot of parents that really just think that school is like daycare for their kids. Mm-hmm. You almost have to be so involved in your kid's life. That's not like an 8-hour break for you to dump your kid off at school. Like you have to be much more involved in that. I don't want to rehash the point that you just made, but I totally agree with that as well. I totally agree with that as well. I mean, you should be teaching your kid all the things that they need for life, not relying on a government school system to do that, because they're going to teach your kids what they want them to know, not what you want them to know.
Yeah, it's just like Eric July says. You're going to give your kids to these people for 8 hours a day and think you're going to change what they taught them for like half an hour at a dinner table. There's no way in hell that's going to happen. There's no way in hell you're going to change what they taught them.
Now, is the Department of Education and certain things like that kind of another way for, this is kind of going into conspiracy, but we're seeing it kind of come true more and more for the leftists to kind of create a sane society, to create a society where everyone is thinking one way, because they're going to couch it as, well, we need the Department of Education because we want to get education more clear across the board. We want to make sure that the poorer areas have as much funding as the wealthy areas. They're always going to couch it in that because funding is everything to the left. That's how they do it. do you think there's an overarching thing of, and we're seeing it now, where teachers are intending to create activists? It's not even an ideological thing. They're trying to create activists. They're not trying to create citizens. Do you see that as the beginning of that branch where they're trying to set a curriculum that's the same across the board? So we're seeing more of a same think, and there's very few kids that come out like David, like me, like you, that look at this and go, a lot of that shit that we were taught wasn't right, especially the social stuff, So do you think that there's an overarching, I'm going to just say, an evil fucking view behind that?
Do that to me?
Yeah, it's you, Paul.
Yes, that's absolutely the point. First of all, you've seen that they're trying to destroy the nuclear family, right? That's already, they want to get rid of the nuclear family. They want to indoctrinate your kids at school, right? So now they've destroyed your home life. Now daddy government's going to teach you what they want at school. You were talking about the central bank digital currencies. That's the start of the social credit bullshit where they can just lock you down if you're.
It's already started with ESG and the hedge funds, and their ESG is already controlling what companies are going to be able to do with the environmental social governance. It's already started.
All this stuff is in concert, right? You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist. You just have to listen. Did they say the quiet parts out loud now? I mean, you just have to listen. Literally the stuff in education, the leftists, to use your guys' terms, which is the correct term, the leftists, that is what they're promoting, right? The nuclear family's been under attack for a couple probably 2 decades now. That's been really like, the nuclear family's gone. That's totally gone. So
it started with the Great Society. That was the big start to ripping apart further than that. But that was a big push to get it out of the Black community to make them more susceptible. That was a huge push for that.
Yeah, so all that stuff plays in concert. So I think what you're saying is there is some evil agenda there, and you don't have, and like I said, you don't have to go down the rabbit hole into tinfoil hat wearing territory to see some of that.
Yeah, I both agree and disagree. I only disagree on the part that I don't feel like it's a sameness in schools. It's specifically meant to confuse and break the child in order for them to just automatically go with whatever. So it's not teaching them sameness. It's teaching them confusion. It's teaching them breaking away from parents. It's teaching them that. So it's not exactly teaching them all the same things, because the queer theory stuff is very similar in terms of
thinking. Yeah, no, I mean sameness in terms of thinking, not necessarily in what they know.
Yeah, well, no, because it's a very cult mentality kind of way of thinking and indoctrinating. Yeah. You break someone first in order for them to be able to just listen and just do. So honestly, it's at a point where it's not even thinking sameness. It's just listening.
And, and like you said, Palm, they say the quiet part out loud. Black Lives Matter is the perfect example where everyone agrees, unarmed Black people aren't doing anything wrong, shouldn't be shot by cops. Simple premise. Everyone agrees with that. I don't think there's a human on the planet, unless they are a staunch racist, and more than likely, if they're a staunch racist, they vote Democrat. But there isn't someone like that wouldn't agree with that. But then you hear the people talk that started this organization, and I think it's Colors in one of her interviews said, I'm a trained Marxist. We're trained Marxists. And what do we know about Marxism? They hate the nuclear family. If you went on the Black Lives Matter website and you read there about me, one of their goals was to break apart the nuclear family. It was to push lesbian and LGBTQ and transgender theory. What the fuck does any of that have to do with Black lives is beside me, but it's the same exact thing. And look how not everyone jumped onto that. Every high school jumped onto that, down to middle and elementary school. And we see, and it's the fad of the day, right? Because Black Lives Matter was the thing. Now, nobody gives a fuck about Black lives anymore. That's gone. And now it's Ukraine and the gay flag. So you go into every single high school. You can go around any little strip in a small town. And what do you see? You're going to see a Ukrainian flag up somewhere. There's a chance you see a rainbow flag up somewhere and maybe a few American flags. But it's like the agenda is there, and it's being, and it's being started, and it's disgusting. And I don't know where else to go with it. It's just this type of shit just pisses me off because it's taking the most vulnerable amongst us and fucking them up.
Some of it reminds me of the McCarthyism stuff, where it's like, the people on the far left, it's like they're going along with all this because they don't want their own to turn on them. And they have to keep going further left and further left. And as you guys talked about earlier, the people who are moderates and on the right, they haven't moved. They kind of politically are at home, the same place they've been for a long time. And the left just keeps going further and further. And the further they go, they're losing people, right? They're losing Russell Brand along the way. They're losing Bill Maher along the way. And eventually, what I'm really hopeful is that they're going to just eat themselves at some point. And the one thing that I really can't get my arms around or wrap my head around is I really think I have a hard time figuring out why Black Americans are so loyal to the Democrats. As bad as this country has treated Black Americans through some horrible, horrible practices and laws over the entirety of this country, the entire history of this country, I'm very, and it's actually happening a little bit where I think Trump's numbers with Black Americans were significantly better in 2020 than 2016, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
If that stuff keeps continuing, I think it's only a matter of time. It's going to go one of two ways. Either the left's going to collapse in on itself, or they're going to get into significant power, and we're going to have some AOC as president one day, and things are just going to be really bad.
So we were all taught, David, I think you were taught, all of us were taught about the switch. And that is one of the way that they keep Black people and people that are necessarily against racism, they keep them on the side. We were all taught that at one point, the ideologies shifted, where Republicans were the party of freeing the slaves. But at one point during Richard Nixon's campaign, the Southern strategy, it shifted and no one ever looks into it. And it's all bullshit. There was never an ideology change. None of it stopped. But since the media has always been a leftist, gigantic global media, they go with whatever the narrative is that the leftists are telling them. So they all accepted the switch. And unless you really look into it, or unless you just look into the history of how the left has always talked about minorities versus how the right has always talked about them, it's easy to see. It's easy to see. Go ahead, Dave.
I will say it's a little more than that. There's going to be a controversial hot take here. I will say it's a little more than the switch, because I feel like the switch is more of a last resort argument that a lot of people use when backed into a corner on this. I really do feel like, especially with the Black community, because of the things that happened to them, of course, they became a more insular in a way. I would say not even in a way of keeping themselves segregated, but saying like, hey, we kind of need to look out for each other because some shit's going down. I feel like that was pushed on them at one point. And since that's been slowly eroded over time to where there was more and more in the Black community that didn't think that every white person was out to get them. But when you're consistently taught in your community, like, if you looked at, I'm sure some Southern communities during the Jim Crow era, you'd find a lot of white parents talking to their kids about their white skin all the time. If your parents are talking to you about your skin color all the time, that's kind of something you're thinking about all the time and all the time. And what party like just completely talks about your skin color all the time and how good it is?
Or any immutable characteristic at this point.
Exactly. Any immutable characteristic, but the skin color is what we're talking about. Yeah. So that is the thing that tells me it pulls for them the most, because you're in a community where you're consistently talking about your skin color all the time. Like, that's one thing that's always brought up in the Black community. And this really isn't a hot take. If you go on Black Twitter, it isn't a hot take at all. People will act like it is because they don't hang around Black people at all. But this is something that's brought up consistently. And when it is, that's what you think about all the time. And if you have one party that's pandering to a skin color and to an immutable characteristic, and another party that's not doing it as much, you're going to go with the one party. But when you start thinking like, hey, maybe not every person with the same skin color actually has my back, and maybe people are individuals, you start breaking off a little more. That doesn't mean you're going to vote Republican, but that just means you're not always going to vote Democrat every single time. Now, I'm sure there's more to it, but I feel like that's a big part that people don't talk about. People just simply do not talk about how much emphasis is placed on skin color in the Black community itself as well. And it's not like I said, happened from past relations, but it takes time to erode that. But now we're going back to it. And it's only going to get worse in some areas. Like Palm said, the left, honestly, I think the left's going to collapse in on itself before anything happens. Honestly, I think we'll win. But on the off chance that we don't, things will get worse.
Now, I think ghettoization has had a lot to do with that, because as the slaves were leaving the South, the left wanted to keep control of black people. So what did they do? They herded them into projects. They herded them into communities. They forced them to rent. How many black people actually own places in major cities now or around? It's not new. It was going on where there were a lot of black people in suburbia, but then certain laws and certain things that the left did pushed them back into ghettos. So it's kind of another thing where they're starting to control or have been controlling how the black people function again. Because what is it? If you live in the ghetto and you're relying on the government, you're going to go with the party that is constantly telling you, we're going to give you more to keep your life going. So it is very simple math. Now we're having some fun here. Palm, how much more time do you have?
I got all night.
All night. Oh boy, this could be a marathon.
When I'm talking about this stuff, I could talk forever. I got too much to say. Put it that way.
I don't want to go. Maybe Palm. Maybe we'll have you on again because I don't know if you know about the World Economic Forum and all that type of stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, the New World Order and all that kind of stuff. That one world government, all that. Yeah.
So let's why don't we close out the show here because we've been going out for a little bit. And when we have you back, we can kind of talk about the New World Order bullshit and kind of bring that in because I think that has a lot to do with the battle being waged between the leftists and everybody else. And like you guys said, maybe they might collapse on themselves, but I think their goal is to get what Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum wants before that can even happen. Because if Klaus Schwab gets what he wants, parties aren't going to matter. So we shall see, but I think we're going to close it out here. I thought it was a fun conversation and a great show. Palm, thank you so much for coming on, bro.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. If at least one person that questions their own thoughts that they have in their head, I think then the show was worth it. So I appreciate you having me on and I had a lot of fun.
Ant just called everybody fucking crazy. He said we all have thoughts in our head. Dave,
I hope you do. I hope you have thoughts in your damn head.
There's nothing that goes on in his head. On a day-to-day basis, it is just rocks kicking around with some dust. That's all that goes on in here. Dave, do you have anything to say before we close out?
Yeah, basically the same thing Palm said. It's not even agree. You don't have to agree. Just think about what was said. Think, if you think, oh, that's stupid, let me find things to prove why that's stupid. Do it. Just do it because you might find more about whatever we're talking about. I don't care what you think about what I or Palm or my brother said. Look things up if you really want to. I really should recommend that you should because it's better to know more than less. But you don't have to agree. Just look things up.
And opposite of those two, if you don't fucking agree, you're probably wrong. No, I'm just kidding. But appreciate everyone for listening. The only people that are truly wrong are leftists who are groomers and pedophiles and want kids from ages 4 to 9 to be talked about sexual orientation.
Yeah, we didn't even go into that.
We didn't go into the quote unquote don't say gay. Oh, also, did you see the new bill that they're trying to label the marry little kids bill?
Yes, but
which if it's a 2-page fucking bill, please go read the bill. No one read a 7-page bill from Florida. Please go read the 2-page bill from, what is it, Tennessee?
I think so. I don't know.
2-page bill. Jesus Christ. I'm going to close out before I go down another rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. Everyone, thanks for listening so much. Like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth and go find us on socials, The Alex Cuesta Show. Once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking through my fucked up voice. Hopefully I'll feel better tomorrow and I will be back. Everyone, so long.